Business Investment Summit 2021 is brought to you by ICICIdirect.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to be here talking to all of you this afternoon. Somebody coined this word called VUCA, and this was actually coined way back, I would say, in the late 80s. It stands for volatile, as you all know, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. I would think there's a reason why somebody imagined that, and when you think of what we are going through and think about the VUCA-ness that it depicts, it perhaps typifies our environment. But just think about it. Just like this topical virus has been mutating, to my mind, even this VUCA-ness has perhaps mutated. And from a VUCA world, we are probably transiting to what I would call a ruptured world. What does it stand for? R stands for rapid. U, of course, uncertain. P is for paradoxical, and T is for tangled. So just think about it. Just add that VUCA-ness to this ruptured world, and probably this is what our environment is today. And to think of handling ourselves, our careers, our wellness and health, and of course our financial health is quite a challenge. So in such a context, what I thought I will do this in this session is try to construct some of the transformational shifts that I'm clearly seeing in businesses that all around us. So the first one, which I'm sure all of us can relate to, is that the traditional format of working itself seems to have undergone a complete change. From a traditional brick and mortar world, it has all moved to a remote virtual world, and all of us seem to have adjusted and operating quite all right. Look at consumer behavior. The manner in which consumers are consuming stuff, buying stuff, investing in our world is undergone a massive change. Everything has become remote. Everything has become digital. Look at various businesses. What we find here is it's a very interesting combination of technology and data sciences coming together and bringing out massive innovation. And it's happening across sectors, across industries. Let me take a few examples. Let's take, simple, straightforward industries like, let's say, hotels, restaurants. Look at the way technology has brought about disruption in that space. The carry food apps that we are all using to, manage our affairs, day-to-day affairs. The Airbnb, before the pandemic broke out, I think completely disrupted the hotel industry. It's only accelerating in the current context. Look at banking, lending, payments. You have apps, dime a dozen. We recently had the IPL matches, and we could clearly see so many ads coming out from a large number of payment providers and so on and so forth. So there is massive disruption taking place in banking space, payment space. Look at insurance. Look at the way insurance is getting distributed and consumed. From a very physical format, there is rapid evolution of digital format. Look at entertainment. Look at media. Today, entertainment has got a competition from gaming, digital gaming. The forms of businesses, the forms of competition are also undergoing change. The traditional world is becoming far more accessible, democratized, to a lot more people. Talent is getting access to perform in the entertainment space, which otherwise they would have found it very, very difficult. Even retailing. The traditional retailers versus the e-commerce. You can clearly see, and all of us are experiencing this today. But it's not just these services. Even traditional businesses. Let us look at the business of making cars, as traditional as it can get. Today, they are getting challenged by the advent of new forms of cars in form of the electric vehicles. Energy business, another very traditional business. They are facing competition from clean energy. So disruption, innovation that is happening because of technology is here to stay. And in the investment world, which is again closer home, again, there is so much of changes and disruptions. In fact, today, when you talk to investors who invest into India, many of them are actually talking of very important subjects like environment, social, societal impact of businesses, and governance stance of companies. And companies who have adopted a sound ESG practice, a sound ESG policies are finding favor. They are able to attract more capital. And going forward, I think this trend is only going to accelerate in the future. In the Indian context, there is another very important transformation that is here for all of us to experience. And this is the emergence of what one would call a digital native into economic India. What I mean by this is Gen Z, the people, the children today, if I can use that word, born in 96 and beyond, they are virtually being born with a mobile phone handset in their hands. And that generation is now coming into economic India. They are going to be the consumers of present and future. And these individuals are wired very differently. They are inspired differently, they think differently, they are motivated differently. And therefore, if one has to connect with them, one has to service them, you have to do it differently. So it's both a challenge for traditional businesses as also an opportunity that is for us to see. Well, that's the environment about business and the transformation shifts that one is seeing around. But look at even when you try and explore what's happening on the economic front, I would see that there is so much of fragility around us. Look at all our economic indicators. All of them are at best fragile. There are risks of inflation. Growth rates look promising, but once again, the second wave has sort of made us relook at as to what it's eventually going to be. So I would say that in the context of such economic indicators, whatever we see around us, we see that even businesses is probably going into what one could call a multi-speed zone. Industries are going through multi-speed zone. Let's take again the example of IT, pharma, staples. In today's context, I think they seem to be all right. They seem to be doing quite okay. But then contrast it with, let's say, airlines, with hotels, travel and tourism industries. I think they are really very fragile. They are actually struggling in their own right. Even certain sectors, which let's say the auto sector, they are showing fluctuating trends. There have been periods when they've done pretty well, and there are phases when there has been a big pullback. Even retailing, for instance, another sector, another business, that the trends are very divergent. If you're a traditional retailer, it's not so easy today. But if you're an e-com company, I think business is exploding. So there is massive transformation that we are seeing in a societal and a business environment context. There is massive transformation that we are seeing in the economic environment, and oblivious to all this, the market seems to be in its own trajectory, right? Even while there is so much of uncertainty on the economic environment, market seems to have, the market indicators seem to be hitting new highs in such otherwise difficult economic times. So what really explains this divergence? I think there are two fundamental factors. One, clearly, is massive global liquidity. Every regulator in the developed markets has taken a very facilitative stance to support economies. So a lot of this global liquidity is looking for investment avenues, and a fair amount of share of that has actually come to emerging markets, and India has certainly been a beneficiary of this trend. The second reason really is that the investors have factored in a hope of a strong growth recovery. I think there are reasons for that. You have a vaccination which is in the process of getting rolled out. Sooner or later, I think infections rates are going to come under control, and there is a confidence of a strong growth to return. So liquidity and anticipation of growth, and that's what markets being forward-looking are factoring in and providing that seeming divergence from the otherwise fragile economy. But let's not forget, if any of these assumptions do not actually play out or even underperform to expectations, I think we are going to see massive volatility. So you have business and societal transformations, you have a fragile economy, you have markets at its new high, and you have impending volatility if these assumptions don't play out. So what does one do? What should I do in such a context? Well, I would simply say that I think it is certainly time for all of us to come back to the drawing board and look at what one needs to do with one's own investment goals. For starters, I would say first, it's very important to deal with somebody whom you feel very comfortable with, someone who's knowledgeable, someone who is experienced in the space. And again, I would say planning your investment horizons in a particular, at any time, particularly in volatile times, certainly calls for very clear personalization. It's got to reflect your personal objectives, your age, your risk appetite, and keeping aside what is required to manage your liquidity. Typically, depending on your age, anywhere between 3 to 5 years of your expenditure put aside in something which is liquid, which is safe in form of fixed income. Whatever surplus comes on top of it is something that one can consider investing into asset classes like equities. And here too, I would say one needs to be very tread with a fair amount of knowledge, caution, and research, sound research, which is supporting these decisions. There are lots of changes which are taking place, and again, as I said, there is no single formula for everyone. One has to personalize based on his or her risk appetite and objectives. I think at times like this, it is also important to set aside some amount of such surpluses into gold. In uncertain times, gold is something that acts as a hedge against uncertainty and hedge against inflation, both of which are sort of real today. And finally, I would conclude by saying that volatile times, uncertain times, ruptured times, deal with people whom you feel comfortable with, whom you trust, and people who are experienced as you maneuver yourself with your investments and take full advantages so that your investments thrives in the world that is coming ahead of us. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for a very patient hearing, and wish you all the best as you maneuver into this world forward. And please keep yourself and your family safe. Thank you.